Hi 3A, it's Miss Dowling, and welcome to today's read aloud of Mr. Terupt Falls Again. I cannot trick any of you. I already know that you're saying you're recording in the same day as yesterday because you're wearing the same thing, which is true. I decided to make two videos today for our Mr. Terupt read alouds and get them done in one day. So yeah, I'm using my time wisely. I made myself a really nice cup of tea. My coffee time is over, and now I'm switching to tea. You all know my routine. Today on the menu, it's a chai tea. It's really good. That's good. Came out good. Okay, so I won't bore you anymore. But I'm so glad that you tuned in and you're watching. I hope that you are keeping up with the Mr. Terupt read-alouds. All of them are posted on YouTube, so they'll always be there. If you want to reread something, that's a good reading strategy, a good comprehension strategy is to reread. I think as readers, when we reread, we actually hear it a little bit differently each time. Some of my favorite books I've read twice, and I feel like it's a different experience the second time I read it. You kind of catch things you may not have before. So, yeah, if you want to rewatch these and to get a better understanding, you can. You can share it with family as well. Another thing is some of you are writing your journal entries about Mr. Terupt, and that's totally fine. If you want to, I do want you to do your own reading, but also if one day you do your own reading, but you'd like to journal about this, you can kind of switch things up too. So let's go on into our next chapter, which is in the perspective of Luke. Here we go. Oh, if you're here, you've seen the past video, but just to recap, a baby was found on the side of the road. It was brought into the classroom, and Mr. Terupt's kind of freaking out, so is Ms. Newberry, and we're going to hopefully find out what this is all about. I barged into the classroom just in time. The paramedics were bent over some small, softly wailing bundle. My ears told me what it was, but I took a few sideways steps so that I could see it to believe it. Surely enough, it was a baby. The baby was sucking on a wet washcloth, which explained the muffled cries. I also saw that an IV had been started. I knew from my previous science studies in Boy Scouts that the baby was suffering from dehydration. I'm trying to think of a way to explain an IV. Some of you may already know that, but if you go to the hospital and you're dehydrated, they may put an IV in you to get fluids into your body. What my experience and background knowledge hadn't prepared me for was the answer Mr. Terupt gave my question after the ambulance sped away. Mr. Terupt, where are the baby's parents? I asked. It appears he was abandoned, Luke, Mr. Terupt said. His mom and dad didn't want him, so he was left on the side of the road. Jeffrey found him this morning. Our classroom was still and full of nerves when I walked in. I didn't think there was room for any other feelings. But after Mr. Terupt said that, a shocked sadness consumed us. The air I breathed felt heavier. How could anyone do that to their baby? That was when the police officer in attendance told Jeffrey he needed to talk to him since he had discovered the baby. It made me realize this was a case for a detective, and that everyone had made a huge blunder. Important evidence had been ruined when they cleaned up the baby. Questions. Who and where are the baby's parents? Will we ever know? Detective Luke. Oh boy, I don't know what I would do if that happened to me. Obviously, I would bring it somewhere safe, but I would be in a lot of shock from that. This school year, everyone, is really starting off to a crazy beginning. I mean, wow. We are 50 pages in now, went by pretty quickly, and so much has happened. This class cannot catch a break. It really can't. I am getting a lot of emails, but that's good because that's you submitting your work. I get a notification and I love it. Okay, Jeffrey's perspective. Officer Stoneley was a big man, built like a block, with buzzed hair, sideburns, and a goatee. He wasn't a donut policeman, one of those guys with a huge belly that rubbed on his steering wheel. He looked strong. Stoneley took my report. Basically, I had to tell him what happened. Afterward, we took a ride in his car over to the spot where I found the baby. He needed to see the area, and he wanted me to walk him through the details again. There were several other police cars already at the scene when Stoneley and I got there. I wasn't expecting that or the yellow tape that had the area marked off. This was a real investigation. A woman was taking pictures, and another man and woman were inspecting the shoebox and blanket. I showed those to Stoneley. Everything was still there. Officer Stoneley didn't say anything, but his stone face turned soft. I could see that even behind his dark sunglasses. His body language told how terrible he felt. He grimaced and shook his head, and his shoulders slumped as he let out a sigh. We stood there side by side for a minute, not saying anything. That was when I started thinking about Michael. Mom and Dad did everything in their power to save my brother, and today I found a baby that somebody just threw away. I read that already. How could anyone do that? All right, Stoneley said. That's it. Let's go. We threw my bike in the trunk of his car, and he gave me a ride back to school. Okay, Jeffrey, Stoneley said as we pulled up to the front doors. We're all set. Will you find his parents? I asked, still staring out the front windshield like Stoneley. Hard to say, he said. We'll try. Then there was another one of those silent moments before he took off his sunglasses and looked at me. You did good today, kid. That was nice of him to say, but it didn't feel like it. All right, last perspective for today from Peter, the class clown. Mrs. Williams walked over to Mr. T and asked him if he was okay. He told her he'd let her know if he needed anything. What about them? She asked, meaning us. She looked at our class with a worried face. We weren't just any kids to her, and you could tell she really felt bad. Why aren't they just any kids to her? What that means is she knows that this class, Mr. Terupt's class, has been through a lot of trauma. Trauma is an experience, something that happens to you that kind of changes you emotionally, and you may feel afraid or upset for a little while after. So this class really has been through a lot, and that's why the principal is pretty worried right now that another thing has happened to this class. Okay, let's see, where did I leave off? Okay, we're fine, Miss Williams, Lexi said. Mrs. Williams nodded and smiled. I'll talk to them, Mr. T told her. I'll put a letter together, she said. He nodded. The letter was for us to take home to our parents, so they could be made aware of the crazy day we just had. It wasn't the first letter with shocking news to come from our classroom. My parents probably wouldn't have time for this one either. Let's talk, gang, Mr. T said. Once it was just us in the classroom. He sat on his desk. I'm sorry I was so gruff when I answered your question, Luke. I shouldn't have said that. But it's the truth, Luke said. We can handle the truth. Mr. T sighed. Yes, unfortunately, I think what I said probably is the truth. But let's keep in mind we don't know the whole story. He stood and walked closer to us. This is a situation that most adults would prefer to keep from children, because it's not something you need to know or worry about at your age. But there was no protecting you from it today. The world can be a harsh place, and you witnessed that cold reality firsthand. You've been forced to grow up today in ways that aren't fair to you. You had to do that last year, too. I looked at Mr. T's dented head and saw myself throwing that snowball again. Right, he's having flashbacks from the end of last year. There's no denying it. Mr. T went on. You're a special group. I wish I could tell you why all this happened, but I can't. Someday it might make sense. I don't know. If I was so grown up because of all of this, I wondered, why couldn't I find the courage to tell my father I didn't want to go to that boarding school? A few chapters ago, we learned that Peter, this is 6th grade, so next year they're going to a completely new school. Just like at LCA, when you graduate 8th grade, your next step is in a new building and a new school. For Snow Hill School, it ends at 6th grade, so 7th grade they're in a new building, new school. They're all going to be separated, not even in the same building as Mr. Terupt anymore, which I can predict that at the end of the year, that's going to be a pretty sad goodbye. Peter, however, knows that he's not going with his friends to the same school. He is going to a boarding school. So, and he does not want to go. Remember his plan to fail the year on purpose? Not a good idea. So that wraps up today's read aloud. I hope that you're enjoying the book so far. We are now heading to page 54 in the perspective of Alexia, and that will be up tomorrow. So I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you soon.